Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult video 181. Paganism, not Christianity, built civilization. I hear echoed over and over, including among people that are highly intelligent in every other aspect, and that sometimes I agree with things on generally. They say, oh, those dirty, barbarous, filthy pagans never did anything. Christianity is the flame of the West. Christians built the West. Christians built Western civilization. Then I think of ancient Rome. And I think about the sort of things they were able to build, the society that they were capable of having, or ancient Egypt, or Persia, or any of these others, Athens, all of which existed before Christendom did. And I say, oh, how did they do this? How could the Romans have invented all of the weird stuff that they invented? Look, the ancient Greeks already had at least a primitive understanding of electricity. It appears that they had posts for lightning rods on their temples just to wow the parishioners, so to speak. What about electroplating a la the Baghdad battery, which appears to be what that was for? People were far more advanced. We now know, 100 years on from the more primitive side of archaeology, how advanced ancient people really were. It was far, far beyond what we were taught, even when we were like kids in school in the 90s or something. We still thought basically, well, Egypt is basically the earliest true civilization. Now it's been pushed back by Göbekli Tepe being more fully unearthed, thousands of years. The Sumerians as well, they were highly developed individuals. We're talking about literate, sophisticated people with hierarchical societies, highly organized, able to field armies numbering in the six-figure totals. We're talking about fully advanced nation states. They were developed before Christianity existed. Megaliths that are astronomically larger than many things that are built today were built fairly regularly, it seems, within the ancient world. Now, you have architecture that defies explanation. It's almost unthinkable how they even dreamed up in their wildest dreams how to perform some of the engineering feats that they did. Those 10-story Roman siege towers must have been quite impressive. Yeah, they must have been quite a thing. Or a cataballistra. Or those mill wheels that they finally discovered, I think only a decade ago within Rome proper. They had a semi-industrialized society. They were probably decades away from full industrialization. They probably would have developed the fucking cotton gin. They probably would have developed full automation. It would be water and wind based, but they had a primitive steam engine. I believe it was Archimedes that developed that, although I could be wrong. Archimedes' screw. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. They probably had windmills up there sucking water continuously up this giant ziggurat covered in plants. That's civilization. That's not the hallmark of barbarism. But yet people will say, no, until Jesus Christ, there's like nothing. Those people, yeah, okay, they built the pyramids or they built a temple. Yawn, who cares? Okay, what did Christians do differently that was any more advanced than that until the Renaissance? Absolutely nothing. Through the entire scope of the Dark Ages, if you look at some of the things that were common within the context of the medieval, we're talking well into the 1000s AD. We're talking 1200s, 1300s. Most aspects of life were not fundamentally more advanced, and in fact, in some cases, were degenerated away from being more advanced then. Things 1,000 years before. That is, Rome is the peak. Essentially, I mean, that's sort of a stereotype, and we're talking about the Mediterranean basin and surrounding areas. We're not talking about East Asia or something. But as far as the European diaspora region of the world, civilization peaks before Christianity exists and into the early Christian period for a couple of centuries. Western Rome collapses. That's basically it. The Byzantine Empire grows weaker and weaker and weaker as it continuously has problems with barbarians. Yes, some of those barbarians were pagans. Others had converted to Christendom. Yeah, like the Templars when they sacked Constantinople, despite the fact that Constantinople was a Christian city. I don't know, I can't recall exactly why they chose to do that. I think it's because they didn't want the Templars to come in and rape people. They closed the gates and the Templars got a little bit mad, managed to smash their way in, I guess. It's nuts. No, Christianity did not build Western civilization. Now, we've got to go to something slightly different. When you claim this, when you say, no, pagans were already civilized, cultured, sophisticated for 1,000 years before Christianity existed, in many areas, in some areas, thousands of years before that, the dawn of civilization is 6,000-7,000 years before Christianity, and even before that there was some technology, some degree of sophistication. Catalhoyuk, Göbekli Tepe. That we're talking 9,000 BC, people already had a degree of organizational structure, a semi-stratified, semi-static society in which they were partially sedentary. They were probably horticulturalists at the time more than anything. They were already at least partially civilized then. They obviously had copper tools and all sorts of things running around. They had all sorts of technology already. They built walls, they built gates, they built temples, they built multi-story homes. If we look at I believe it's the island of Santorini, this is predating the Roman Empire by quite some distance. While the Greek mainlanders were living in things no more sophisticated than wooden huts, people there already had 3-story buildings with indoor plumbing. The island of Santorini, it could have led to the story of Atlantis. If you dig into the volcanic soil there, they've had fully paved avenues, modern road structures, at least to a degree. A very, very sophisticated society. You look at the art, it's sophisticated. The other thing is that Christians get upset when you mention this fact. They don't want you to believe that this is all true. So they'll say, well, you're just saying that Christianity takes man backwards. No, it's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that paganism had already built civilization. Christianity is not required to maintain civilization because civilization was built and maintained for thousands of years before Christianity developed. In fact, you could make the argument that Christianity contributed to the downfall of Western civilization for 1,000 years by centralizing so much power in the hands of religion that then had to intercompete, overlap with, or influence states. Became a little bit of a problem at the time. What the Christian sees as the preservation of knowledge by monks, I see as the direct robbing of literacy from what would have been the mercantile and noble classes by religious structures that didn't want them to be literate. Didn't make any attempt to make them literate because they had basically centralized all educational structures under their religious control. So you had literate monks and nuns and literate priests. They didn't want other people to be able to read the Bible and interpret it, so it was very good to them if 90% of the population couldn't even sign their own name. Couldn't even write their own name. Very, very good for them. I don't go into the Christian Dark Ages stuff. It's partially true, but not fully, so it's not really meaningful. But the pagans already had civilization. Yes, I'm sure Rome in its heyday. We're talking maybe 50 BC or so, at the very height of its culture. It must have been spectacular. It would look probably better than a lot of modern cities in a lot of ways. Not so much plastic and steel and all of that bullshit. But yes, paganism built the West. In fact, a lot of trappings of Christendom, holidays, ritual practices, garb, all that, it's just based on paganism anyway. It's just based on paganism. Look, there are no such things really as Christian holidays for the most part. The concept of the birth on Christmas, the resurrection, or Easter, or something like that, the crucifixion, all the dates are wrong. They're based on solar and lunar movements. Easter's a pagan feast that celebrates sexual reproduction. That's literally the meaning behind Easter. It has nothing to do with Jesus. Why do you celebrate it on a different day then? Along with all of the others, Palm Sunday, and so it's really funny. They keep moving around, but trust us, Jesus did the same thing for an entire week in a row. It makes a lot of sense. Jesus was certainly born in December. That's why the shepherds were out with their flocks in the middle of winter. Makes a lot of sense. No, it doesn't. No, they would have been too busy getting drunk at the inn. They weren't out with their fucking sheep. They weren't out with their fucking goats and camels and shit. They weren't. It's not true. It's based on paganism. If paganism, by the way, if paganism is so bad or wrong or down and low, if it's something so barbarous, why did the Christians base everything off of paganism? Basically everything, other than maybe the worst aspects of the revelational style of philosophy. Now, that's genuinely Christian. It's also genuinely weird. Oh yeah, here's our tale about the seraphim. By the way, cover up your hair or else angels will try to have sex with you and you'll give birth to demons or giants or something along those lines. Hybrids, monsters that the world cannot feed. I think that's probably how they figured out how elephants, where they came from. I think it might be a little bit of metaphor because they eat a lot and they're quite intelligent. So maybe they're like, oh, these creatures are awfully intelligent. They must be like humans they're like monsters or something. You know, you never know. If you look at some of the engravings made during the Renaissance, you know, during the early colonial period of what supposedly lurked in the ocean, you know, a whale that has 4 legs and it's got horns and weird shit like that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, if the artistic similarities were there, I can definitely see how the elephant would spawn giant stories. Or the rhino. Or any other large creature. Leviathan. What's Leviathan? It's just a whale. What's behemoth? Literally, probably a hippo or a rhino, something along those lines. Seeing them around the Nile, around crocodiles. You know, it's a dragon, it's a dragon. These are the way that people thought. And the pagans did too. I'm not saying the pagans were totally superstitious. You read some of the lore about them, yes, absolutely. They thought all sorts of weird stuff. But they were just as sophisticated as the Christians were. And then the Christians, you know, take over and kill everyone that doesn't believe their way. And I would say that perhaps the worst aspects of Christianity were maintained while the rest were cast away. Jesus, assuming he existed at all, was sort of just an anarchist who wandered around and said, no, just be with your community. Don't own anything. Go beg for bread, basically. You'll be more holy if you do that. A little bit different from the early founding of Catholicism. That's about all. Peace out.